Welcome to the Resilient Mindset Podcast, an exciting new podcast by Resilience Queen, Justine Martin. Justine is the owner and founder of the Resilient Mindset, a division of the Justine Martin Corporation. Justine draws on her years of experience and knowledge consulting with clients to develop and sustain a positive mindset. Focused on igniting your passion, purpose and power, follow the Resilience Queen each week as she delves into the mind of her guests, exploring fascinating stories and inspiring journeys.
Our guest today is someone who's on a mission to help Aussie blokes rise above the noise, step into their potential and play a bigger game in life. Tory is the author of a powerful book, Blokes Inc. Play a Bigger Game, available on his website and on Amazon. His work is dedicated to shifting the narrative around masculinity, changing men to move beyond autopilot living and taking charge of their mindset, purpose and personal leadership. Whether it's through raw conversations, practical tools or real-life experiences, Tory speaks the language of everyday men and helps them rewire for growth. He's not just a writer, he's a change maker, here to ignite a bigger conversation about what it truly means to be a modern man. Please welcome Tory Trewhitt. Welcome, Tory. How are you today?
Well, thanks, Jazzy, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. So we're going to get straight into it. We'll chit-chat later. What inspired you to write Blokes Inc. Play a Bigger Game?
Yeah, it's a good question. And in all honesty, it was probably something that I started around 16 years ago. I was working in the health and fitness industry, and I had a team of trainers in Melbourne working underneath me. And I worked with a lot of corporate execs and saw an opening with men's health, and that men are reactive, not proactive, and they need a little bit of guidance and some assistance and accountability. And back then, I was single, I wasn't married, I had a team of trainers, and it was like a brand building exercise. And so I was into it, I was doing it for a period of time, and then I got busy like everything else and pushed the book away and just dropped it. And then I actually got sick of the industry. So I checked out of the health and fitness industry after 20 years and got into hospitality, which we'll probably chat about a little bit later on. And then that was a disaster. And the only way to get out of that was probably going back to my habits, my skill set, and practicing what I'd previously preached for 20 years and get back into the health space. So I was in a deep, dark hole, not doing anything correctly or properly or well. And the book was probably something that straightened me up, got me accountable, realigned. And the read is probably now more authentic, Justine, than it was when I committed to it some 16 years ago.
So that's a long time between start and finish, 16 years. A lot of people would stop and put it aside and never go back to it. So I applaud you for your dedication because, 80% of people want to write a book, but only 5% actually get to that point, and even less go through and get it published. So congratulations on having your book published through Morpheus Publishing.
Yeah,
Let's throw that in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you were a big part of it, to be honest. And so also Andrew Jockling, who I'd known of in the health and fitness industry. And I actually employed him as my accountability coach. And through Andrew, I got onto Morpheus. Yep. And they were probably the two key pillars that thought, right, I'm going to finish this. But when I had my own business, I always liked to lead by example. And, some 16 years ago, I started running marathons, and then they got easy. So I'd show my trainers and my staff and my clients that I could do ultra marathons. So I started doing ultra marathons. And I guess for me, the book was, let's lead by example. And as you say, become a 5%er. And it was something always in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. And I was the third born. I've got two older sisters. One's a psychologist and one's an accountant. And I was the jock, but none of them have written a book. So I thought, bugger it, I'm going to lead by example and show them that the younger brother can become an author.
Awesome. So what does playing a bigger game mean to you, and how does it differ for Aussie blokes?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I talk about it in the book, Bio-Individuality, because I think in terms of health or fitness or anything, you've really got to look after yourself first and foremost and come up with a protocol or an understanding of what's going to work for you. And when I looked at, a subtitle, Play a Bigger Game was one of those sort of hashtags, catchphrases that sort of gives you the invitation to take ownership of the lifestyle that you want to lead. You know, we all know that when you feel good, you show up better in your relationship, in your work, in your purpose. And for me, play a bigger game is exactly that. It's being the hero of your own story.
Yeah. And look, this isn't just for Aussie blokes either. This is for all blokes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. And as you know, we launched my first book launch in April in Byron Bay. And one of the questions from the audience was, you know, how does this relate to women, or is there a key message in here? And it's probably not. And I spoke about it to another client this morning. It's not gender neutral. It's not age, demographic. And as you want me to do is write a book for the teenagers.
That I do.
Yeah, but as you say, it is applicable to all men. And I'd love to go to America because I think that's one area that, you know, obesity and lifestyle diseases. And that's what I see with the Aussie male. It's typically a lifestyle disease that's sending us to an early grave. So, you know, there's some key messages. It's only a 12-chapter book, but there are some key messages that relate to any gender, any age.
And it's an easy read as well. So, you know, you don't have to be an intellect to pick up that book and read it. And, I mean, you can just read one particular chapter. You can go through and read that one particular chapter that, you know, resonates with you right at that particular time, which is what I like. I mean, you took away from my question on who did you write the book for. So it's for everyone.
Yeah, it is for everyone. And as you say, the format is important, and your team sort of helped me develop that and put it into the publication it is today. And I think it is an easy read. And I always had that exec, you know, that's flying from Melbourne to Sydney or commuting daily, that they could just pick up and read a chapter, you know, in the morning or on the flight or on their commute to work. And it's a workbook, you know. So, you know, if you're struggling with one of your dimensions, whether that be nutrition, exercise, sleep, social connectivity, work on that chapter and master that first. I really encourage people to, you know, become multidimensional. I've seen too many clients focus on what they thought they were, you know, supposed to do and work hard and earn all this money. But whilst that was happening, they'd lose connection with their friends, they'd make all this money, they'd get divorced, and they'd lose, you know, 3/4 of it. And one thing that was pretty common, and that was, you know, neglecting their health. And we all know if you're not healthy, then you're not happy.
Oh, if you're not healthy, you've got nothing in life. I, of all people, know that looking after your health is the number one priority, and then everything else comes next. So,
yeah.
Would you say that's a core theme throughout the book, or the message that you hope the readers take away is that it's about your health, it's about looking after you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And that's why I call it Blokes Inc., with the key message of run your body like a business. And I think in business, and you know, we've all been an employer or an employee, and you're always accountable to something, whether that be goals or KPIs or sales targets. But a lot of us go to work, turn up, and we just function on autopilot, and we have no conscious awareness of our personal biometrics. We don't understand what our blood pressure is, what our stress level is, what our cortisol, calcium score, waist to hip ratio, and simple things like that get out of hand pretty quickly. And as we've seen, the increase in lifestyle disease. And I think one of the key messages is personal health accountability, and that's showing up day in, day out.
This is what we were talking about earlier. I mean, we're not taught any of this. These are basic life survival skills. But we're not taught it in high school. Our parents didn't teach it to us because they didn't know about it. So it's really our generation that's then teaching the next generations going through. But we've got to start with our own bodies first. Would you agree?
100%. And it is that personal health accountability. And I see it all the time. I do, you know, executive health assessments, and I say, how's your blood pressure? And the number one question is, the doctor says it's fine. I said, well, what is it? Oh, it's fine. But they don't know the number, but they know their mortgage repayment, they know their credit card debt, they know what they earn a year, but they've got no idea. And whether they put all the responsibility back onto the doctor or
they haven't been to the doctor and they're just bullshitting about it.
Yeah. More importantly, I think you're right. And I often say that men are reactive, not proactive, when it comes to health, and they've got no idea. And unfortunately, and I don't like to talk badly on the health profession or doctors, but they're looking at disease state. They're not looking at optimal health. Someone like yourself who's had, you know, health battles, you're all over it. You know, you're always doing self-care and test and measure. And I always say, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it.
That's right. 100%.
So a lot of the people that I deal with, they don't know where to start. And that's probably why they don't start, because it's a bit daunting. And this industry, the health and fitness industry, there's so many fads and fly-by-nighters. That's probably one reason why I ejected. I was just sick of these Instagram people making a lot of money, but had no, educational background, and were coming up with a cookie cutter approach, and they were there one day, not there the next, but made a lot more money than I ever did.
So let's talk about shifting from autopilot to intentional living. What are some signs that someone's stuck in autopilot?
Well, I think the biggest sign of someone stuck in autopilot is they're just doing the same thing day in, day out. They're not willing to change. They're not willing to adapt. And I talk about it in the book. And after chapter number 1, chapter 2 is on mindset. And I think a lot of people's mindset is environmental based, and they live with how they've been brought up, or their beliefs, or their friends' beliefs, or their peers' beliefs, or their employees' beliefs. And they're not willing to have that growth mindset. They think, I'm too old to do that, or I can't start now, or it's gone too far. And so they just run on autopilot, and they treat their health like, I'll deal with it eventually, or after I do this, or after I, have a holiday, or the boys.
They don't even think about it at all.
Until they have to. And that's typically what I see in every chapter, as you know in the book, is a client story. Yeah. And most of the time clients approach me because they've been given a diagnosis.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, the majority of people, and typically men, but it can be both genders, they don't do anything about their health until it's nearly too late.
100%. And it's scary. And I was talking to a business colleague yesterday about it, that the number of men between sort of 35 and 55 that are taking the option of finishing up because it's all too hard. And they've got wives, families, kids that they just leave behind because they can't see a positive or find a positive. I think that's a dramatic step to take for something that might be as easy as picking up the phone or speaking to a friend or, a health professional.
Yeah. What role does vulnerability play in personal growth for men?
That's huge, Justine. And I found out the hard way, because I hid a lot of it, or I was embarrassed or ashamed, and I didn't want to share my story because I felt like I didn't have one. But I think being vulnerable is an opportunity to show and put your hand up that, yes, you might be failing, but what's the lesson, and how can you become stronger and work your way through it? And I think without showing that vulnerability or putting your hand up and taking ownership, then you'll never get over it.
100%. I have a saying that, asking for help is a sign of strength. It's never a sign of weakness, and you don't have to do it alone. There's professionals like yourself, Tory, that can help. The book itself is a great start in improving your life and taking, that first step.
Yeah.
And going.
And I think that's really important. And I listened to a podcast a couple of days ago, and the guy that was being interviewed, an American guy, said it's okay to show your scars, but don't show your wounds. And I think what he's saying is, it's okay once you come through it and share your story on the other side. But whilst you're in it, it's very hard to give advice. But I think that's the advice you need. And one of my mates came up to visit me when I was in the hospitality space, and I was in a bad place and had socially disconnected for a long period of time. And he said, Tory, a problem shared is a problem halved, and I think that is, a sign of vulnerability, is showing, I am struggling. I'm not happy. The family's not happy. What's the opportunity moving forward? And just stay in the game. And that comes down to resilience, because people say, well, what is it, a week, a month, 6 months? There's no time limit, unfortunately. But if you get day in, day out, and as everyone knows, does that habit stacking and trying to improve one thing every day, then at the end of a month, things are going to be better.
Yeah, 100%. What's one strategy from the book that readers can implement today to start playing a bigger game?
I think the number one strategy is going through the book, or a bit of self-identity, in terms of understanding what's one dimension that is affecting your current lifestyle. Is it sleep? Is it stress management? Is it social connectivity? Is it nutrition? Is it lack of exercise? And if you rate them all out of 10, and 10 out of 10s, I'm doing really well in exercise, and 4s, I'm doing really poor with my friendship group, understanding what you need to bring up and work on that dimension first. And then, you sort of prioritize, maybe the top 4. I talk about 3 really important ones in the book, but there could be 4. And just start with something you can improve on. And for corporate execs, the classic thing is sleep hygiene. So, establish a sleep routine, same time, go to bed every night, get up every morning. There's no such thing as a sleep bank, so you can't go without sleep the whole week and then sleep all weekend. And hydration's a big part, Jazzy. I see a lot of corporates or execs working, and they'll wake up and they just live in that cortisol space. They have a coffee before they do anything, have another coffee and a carbohydrate and a muffin on the way to work. Then they're in air conditioning, a false environment, under artificial light. They don't get any vitamin D. And then they go to the vending machine to get a sugar fix. So there's no surprise that they feel bad.
Right, that's exactly right. I mean, people ask me how I get everything done. As you know, I'm always extremely busy in running 5 businesses. And when I tell them that I don't drink tea or coffee, they're like, how do you get it all done? And I'm like, well, easy. I make sure I get my adequate sleep every night. I only drink water throughout the day and night. I drink alcohol on a social occasion only. I would drink 3 to 4 litres of water every 24 hours. And I don't eat sugar. Yeah. So, but I wasn't always like that. I was the female equation of what you were talking about back in my late 20s, and totally changed my lifestyle. And it took a long time to do it. It didn't happen overnight. But those habits, I've taken through now. It's 33 years since I've had a cup of coffee.
Oh,
or caffeine.
I'm envious.
Or caffeine, and it's like, I couldn't live without that. And I'm like, well, you can. I'm living proof that you can. Yeah. It's just a false belief that you've been telling yourself. And, I encounter people of both sexes, but it's like, I was meant to be this body size. And I'm like, I call that as a false belief as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of people, and that's why you touched on it earlier, the book is an easy read because I took all the science out of it, because people don't want to read about it. They see a lot of things on social and think they need to be getting in a nice bath and infrared sauna and journaling. And I mean, if we can all do it, that's fantastic. But you can do simple things like drinking more water, getting more sunlight, eating more protein. That makes a huge difference to how you feel and function. Sleep more. Yeah, sleep is massive.
You can't survive on 4 or 5 hours a night.
No, and there's enough evidence and studies to show that, less than 1% of those people that can survive on no sleep. And at some stage, it catches up on you.
They use sleep deprivation in the world wars as a form of torture. That in 100%. Itself should tell you that it's not good for you, and it affects you mentally in the long term by not having the sleep. We need sleep in order for our cells to rejuvenate. And 100%. When you're sick, you'll need more sleep in order for you to recover. So, sleep's very, very, very important.
Have you ever thought about writing your own book? Join the Morpheus Publishing Writing Group program and turn your dream into reality. Contact Morpheus Publishing today and start your journey to becoming a published author.
You included actionable steps. We did that in most of the chapters. How did you decide what to include and what to leave out?
Yeah, and you've said it's not going to be in my last book, but it took me 16 years, so who knows?
And listeners and those that are watching at home, I can assure you it will not take him another 16 years to put the next book together. Not now he's working with Juzzy from Morpheus Publishing. That's
right. And I think to answer your question in terms of what to include and what to leave out, I think the health and fitness industry is so overpopulated with these fads that I touched on earlier. Yeah. But if you go back to the non-negotiables, and you and I talk about the perfect threesome, it is sleep, nutrition, exercise, but you could probably pop in or swap in mindset or social connectivity. So there's probably 5 key ones that you could, cross-pollinate. But if you can get your sleep right, if you can eat properly and eat more protein, and exercise, and by exercise that is getting your heart rate up. It's not playing golf, going fishing, or walking the dog. It's meaningful exercise. They're the 3 dimensions that I think you really need to nail.
Yeah, 100%. So you just kind of brushed on it. Let's talk about the perfect threesome.
Oh, Jazzy. Wow. That was actually my subtitle, but you deleted that and we went for play a bigger game.
We did.
But yeah, for me, the perfect threesome, I think, as I said, there's probably 5 key elements. And when I look at structuring the book, chapter number 1's a bit about me, so you might read that first just to see and understand what I went through. And then I'd suggest for the reader to go what they are struggling with most, and whether that be sleep, whether that be nutrition, or whether that be exercise, sort of nail that chapter. But there was a really good chapter there from a client of mine probably a decade ago that reached out after he'd relocated for work, knew something was wrong, knew that he was mildly depressed. He thought he was doing everything right, and we sort of picked it apart through Zoom calls and consults and online assessments, and it really was that social piece that he was missing. So again, everyone's different, and that's why I encourage you to look at your dimensions and develop a plan that is specific to you. But I think in simple, the perfect threesome is sleep. You've got to get 8 hours or aim for 8 hours. In terms of nutrition, you've got to eat more protein. Everyone's got to eat more protein. And when it comes to exercise, you've got to lift heavy things. And I talk about, obviously the benefits of weight training and resistance training, but also zone 2, getting your heart rate up. Yep. I think it's really important that you do that on a consistent basis.
100%. 100% agree with you. I mean, people are looking for the fountain of youth in bottles, in 100%. Medication, and the perfect threesome is the fountain of youth. I mean, people don't believe how old I am when I tell them, and I practice the perfect threesome. So I weight train 3 days a week, Pilates 2 days a week, I walk when I can, and I drink water, and I sleep, and I eat lots of protein. So I'm actually following the Blokes Inc., even though I'm female. So there you go.
And I think that's why the partnership worked, Justine, with yourself and Morpheus and myself as a new author, is you were doing a lot right. You're successful as a multiple business owner, and you do run your body like a small business. And I encourage people to do that. You keep yourself accountable. You're very structured in your approach, and through that you get to achieve a lot of success, personally and professionally. You've also got a wild card in terms of what you've been dealt with your health, but you're getting through it, and you can only do it because you measure it, you manage it, and you're accountable.
That's right. I mean, I could let it define me, or I can go, no, it's over there. It's a constant reminder every single day, but it's like, no, I'm going to take care of myself, and I am the healthiest I've been in my whole life, despite having stage 4 cancer and MS and mast cell activation syndrome and all of that thrown in there. From it. Most people who meet me don't even realise that there's something wrong, because self-care is the number one thing in my life that I take care of.
Yeah.
So let's talk about masculinity.
Yes.
So do you think the definition of masculinity is evolving, and how does Bloke Inc. support that shift?
It's certainly definitely evolving. I think there's been a big shift. There's been a lot of talk about it. I think the boundaries and the relationships and the conversations around that has certainly changed. And I think in terms of Blokes Inc., I think I'm trying to get men and blokes to become more proactive rather than reactive. And I think if we can take a number of things out of women, it's the ability to show up consistently, share and communicate your feelings, and always look at self-improvement.
So do you think Aussie men are ready to have a deeper conversation about purpose, emotion and fulfillment?
Yes.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah. And it's a very good question. It's something that I've never been good at, and it's probably been environmental from my father. And my dad died when he was 14, so he never had that role model. So I grew up with dad who worked 6 or 7 days a week, was self-employed, and was a great provider. But I think the boundaries these days between, what we're expected to do, what we need to do, and what we have to do are changing and evolving. And I think that space men have been a little bit lost in terms of what they need to focus on and what they need to do well. Or are they a provider, or are they, a full-time father or a carer? And I think that continues to evolve over time. But I do think by sharing my story and what I have on a few podcasts to date, and also my recent book launch in Byron Bay, I've had over a dozen people contact me and say, that was so good to see you so vulnerable and so open. And then they shared their story. And unfortunately, we need to be able to be vulnerable first and break down the masculinity and the barriers surrounded that, and put your hand up. And unfortunately, this mental health crisis is getting worse and worse. But we've got more access to information, education, and resources. But I think
but no one's using them.
But I think the next step is, and plenty of people are doing it. And there's a lot of movements out there. And I think the more we talk about it and saying it is okay to show your hand, the better we'll all be.
Yeah. So do you believe that's the biggest challenge facing men today? Or if not, what is the biggest challenge facing men? And how does the book help tackle that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's different for everyone. But I think that it's redefining the landscape of what blokes should be. And I've often talked about it in the corporate space. Wear one hat, not multiple hats. Be the same person in the workplace that you are outside of the workplace. But there's a lot of misconceptions of being the character I should portray in the workplace versus the lover, the father, the partner, the friend that I should be outside of the workplace. And again, I think if you can take ownership of who you are, take ownership of who you want to be, and to the extent of what the legacies that you want to leave behind, then you'll be better off. And hopefully through the conversations of Blokes Inc. and, always looking to grow and develop on a personal level and not be so single-minded and one-dimensional, then we'll all be better off. And, I can't speak highly enough of people that look more than, the 9 to 5, which is not 9 to 5 anymore, but they define themselves by their job title or their German car or their salary, rather than looking for true happiness. And that is acceptance, love from your kids, your partner, your friends, and your family.
Family is my number one. Family gets me out of bed. Family gets me doing everything that I'm doing. I'm a grandma as well. And even helping with that generation, because it's legacy going on. And family's right. It's up the top. Self-care, family.
Yeah.
They're two top things.
And for you, it's paying off, professionally as well, because you do dedicate so much time, and you don't feel like you're neglecting your family. But, I talk about Steve Jobs in the book, who was probably one of the best entrepreneurs the world's ever seen. But at the end of the day, his health got him, and that got him way too early, early 60s. And I quote him in the book, and he says, he was defined by the success and the money and all that sort of stuff. But when he was laying on his sickbed, the number one thing that he wanted was his health.
Yeah.
And he couldn't trade it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and I said this at the beginning, if you don't have your health, it doesn't matter.
100%.
I, of all people, know that if your body, the vessel of yourself is not healthy, then you got nothing in life. I want to talk about someone who also struggles with their health and who is a good mate of yours, and that's Michael Klim. He is an amazing man, and I was very fortunate at your book launch in Byron Bay to actually meet him. How did that come about, him writing the foreword of your book?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it was great that he was able to come out to the Byron launch and put his hand up and again be vulnerable in terms of his health battles. But I initially met Clemmy early 2000s. He was still a professional athlete training at Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre, and that's where my business was based. And Clemmy did a lot of land-based training towards the end of his career, but also a lot of time in the water.
So I'm just going to interrupt there. For those that don't know who Michael Klim actually is, he is a former Australian Olympic swimmer. So when you say land-based, it's because he's not in the pool swimming laps. Just to clarify that, because some people in the next generations down from us
100%.
have got no idea. So
Yeah, and he's got an Order of Australia, and he was inducted to the World Swimming Hall of Fame. Like, he was a serious athlete, probably one of Australia's best, and particularly at that time when Australian swimming was so good. He was at the peak of his powers, and his mindset is incredible. And I was fortunate towards the end of his career. I got to help him on a personal and a professional level. And I remember I had a business and we'd do a lot of corporate health stuff interstate, and we flew up. He was still swimming or just missed out on the London Olympics. He was going for his 4th Olympics in a row. And one of the Q&As was, Clemmy, why are you doing this? And at that stage, he was developing a skincare product, which, he created, founded, and then sold it. And to his credit, he's now doing another one. And he said, well, when I was an athlete, my number one goal was to be world champion. He goes, now I'm a business owner. My number one goal is to have the best business. And that was just, he just transferred his skills, his learnings, his lessons from the pool into his professional. He did extremely well. And I was fortunate enough that, we formed a great bond and a friendship. And we trained together, we'd socialise together. We did a bit of racing together, running, and we did Mark Webber's challenge in Tasmania, which was 500 Ks in 5 days. We did that together. We formed a really good bond, and then I moved out of Melbourne and moved up to Byron Bay, and he moved to Bali post-career because his family was based over there. Yeah. And neither of us, we kept in contact through socials, but not a lot. And then when I was in a dark hole, he was in a dark hole, and neither of us knew, and this was during COVID, and he had enormous health battles, and I still look at him today and think, Clemmy, like, this is unbelievable, like probably the biggest challenge of his life. But to his credit, he fronts up every day with the same mindset that he's Olympic gold medalist and wins the day every day. And he's now just started the Klim Foundation, and he's about to launch a new product range, which is the hotel skincare range, sort of a for the boutique hotels. And he's just, he's an incredible human being that's been dealt a lot of tough cards. But I think, and yourself included, Juzzy, life's tough. We all think it's easy, but for everyone, we're all going to have struggles and battles and face, some roadblocks.
I just call them life moments. You can't get from being born to dying without life moments. So if we take the word adversity out and just call them life moments, there'll be happy moments and there'll be sad moments. And, this morning I was talking to 200 year 6 kids about that they're going to have these life moments in front of them, but it's how you cope with those life moments and what you're doing and looking after your body and your mind through those life moments that makes all the difference. And again, asking for help.
Yeah, and it's funny because you say it's what you learn, and I think that's what Clemmy's done. Is he knew what worked really well as a professional athlete when he was structured, when he was committed. He slept well, he ate well, he trained well, and he transitioned and pivoted that in the business sense. And then when he was faced with this autoimmune disease, he had to revert back and thought, shit, I need to own it again. And I did exactly the same space in hospital. We both pivoted and felt sorry for ourselves and asked why me, and probably had too many beers and ate too bad food and didn't exercise. But what got us out of it, what's got you to your health today, Justine, is, it's the perfect threesome. And I can't encourage enough to take that accountability.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process now, sure. TC. What was the writing process like for you? Was it liberating, challenging? I mean, 16 years is a long time to work on this project. You didn't write every day for 16 years.
No. That's right. The book's not that big. But the writing process at the start, as I said, the message was always men's health and looking at inspiration, education, and motivation. But the structure of the book and the messages and the lived experience, I think that was cathartic. That was part of my healing process. And it was really probably putting a full stop at the end of the chapter and closure to that, hospitality career. But without having yourself involved or without having Andrew Jopling involved as my accountability coach, and the MC at Byron said, don't you think it's strange that you have a coach? But I've often thought as a coach doesn't give you the tools or the skills or the words. but they get the skills and the words out of you. They get the best out of you. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed someone to challenge me on how I was writing and question it. And as having always been self-employed, I'm not good with feedback, and having someone to provide.
Really? I wish you told me that when we first started working together.
We're getting there. But yeah, it's been a great process. And I don't even know my English teacher, Peter Callan, if he's still alive, but he would be fascinated, having taught me in English that I'm now an author. He would just...
Funny you say that, because this morning I put up on my report cards from when I was in year 4, and I got an E in spelling. That probably won't surprise you at all. I should have told you that when we first started working.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we've had in our past lives, our previous younger selves, doesn't define us on who we are now.
Yeah, and I made it purposeful not to read any health and wellness books. Like, I buy a lot of books, and I like to go to the bookstore and feel and touch and look. And there was heaps of good books coming out, James Clear and, all these books of health and fitness, and even ChatGPT and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't want to sign up or engage because I didn't want that to change my method or my approach to writing. And I see AI, it always pops up on Instagram and things like that, and I haven't attacked it yet as a tool. But for me, it really was having Andrew as my writing coach, and then you as a publisher, and probably more as a publisher, Juzzy. You did a lot of things, from editing to a good sounding board to also getting the book to life. And
we're still working with you to get that into bigger markets, global markets, and you've got your book launch coming up next week in Melbourne, and and then working about what's next and stuff. With Blokes Inc. and with you as well. Did you have any doubts or fears about releasing your book?
No, not really. And at this stage, and people say, any feedback's good feedback. But fortunately, to date, the feedback's been good. Mum, who's always honest. She did contact me and said, Dad's read the book, and, he thought it was great. But he picked up that you called him an accountant. He's actually a chartered accountant. So that was his only thing that he didn't.
We're out of the will now.
So and I said, Justine's not good with her. But and then I actually got a text from Mum earlier today saying, I don't know if it came across in Dad, because he's not. He doesn't speak with his emotions as much, but he thoroughly enjoyed the book and is really proud.
Oh, how did you feel hearing that?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. And as I said, Dad's dad passed away when he was 14, so he's never come across as that touchy-feely, dad, and he was always, a very good worker, and he created an amazing lifestyle for us. But then again, hit a roadblock. He invested heavily up in far north Queensland, and then there was a pilot strike and a recession, and we went from 2 German cars and a nice house, living in Mount Eliza, to selling everything. Dad driving around in an old second-hand Toyota from a sports Mercedes-Benz. So when I went through the hospitality space, he probably didn't know how bad it was for me at the time.
So you never reached out to him?
I did, but I probably didn't articulate it. And he helped, and there was a stage there where he lent me some money to get out of debt, to be able to, get through that next phase. But I knew that, I might have been down $1 million. Dad might have been down $10 million, at the same stage. And he said, Tory, you're still young enough to get through it, so. And he'd lived it, so he knew, that, yes.
But at any age, if you've got a mindset that you want to achieve it, you will go and achieve it.
Yeah. And I talk about that in my legacy, Juzzy, at the end of the book.
My next question, TT, and you haven't got these questions.
There you go.
Flowing on today, which is great. What kind of legacy do you hope Blokes Inc. creates?
Yeah, well, for me, it's help many. If I can change one person's life and then they go and change another, or share the book, or share the story, or, articulate it. And I'm getting people reaching out to me now saying, this person's in a bad space. Can you talk to him? Can you reach out? Can you have a book? Can you do that? And I think if I can help someone redefine their health and happiness, then I've ticked the box and the book's been a success. And on a personal level, for my kids, if I can say just hang in there, like life is tough. You've seen the ups and downs, being self-employed, living in a place where, you didn't know what the next day was going to look like. But over time, things will improve. And Fee said after the Byron book launch, she said, you probably need to sit down with the kids and explain to them, a bit more about the book, because they're now 15, 14 and 11. But, 4 years ago, they were a lot younger and didn't have any understanding of probably, and we hid a lot of what we were going through. But it wasn't happy times. People often say you don't need money to be happy, but, you certainly need enough money to pay the bills. And for a stage we were struggling.
Yeah. I can relate to that in, as you know, my book, Moxie, is coming out. And my daughter has read the first 5 chapters of it, which is my childhood and starting into my teenage years. And she's like, Mum, I had no idea at all. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, you wait till you get to chapter 30 and then see what's happened.
Yeah.
And so this book, you've left a legacy for your children.
Yeah, well, it's a message, and I often say that I was never a great student, and my goals and ambition was to be an AFL footballer or VFL footballer back in the time, but I was obviously clearly never good enough, fast enough or skillful enough. But I was probably categorised.
Had a different journey for you is what?
Yeah, and a lot of the time you don't know. And I think the beauty of life or the beauty of personal development is you have to have the ability to pivot, and understanding that you actually never fail. You're just learning, and at some stage, you'll have a win. But in life, you probably have more losses than wins. But at the end of the day, the upside is that you're in control of your destination, but you need to take ownership.
Yep, 100%.
Are you loving the podcast so far? Imagine the possibilities if you had Justine Martin guiding you through your writing journey. Whether you're crafting your next big book or perfecting a personal project, Justine's expertise can elevate your work. Don't miss out on the chance to work with a seasoned pro, ready to take your writing to the next level. Message us today and let's make your writing dreams come true.
So have any of the readers shared, you've had feedback from the readers, have any that have really moved or surprised you?
I've had some really interesting feedback, actually. And I had one guy approach me. I had two. One guy approached me and he'd actually just split up with his wife. And he said, this book has come at the right time. He goes, I'm going to read it cover to cover and then go back and pick it apart. Mm-hmm. And then there was another guy who used to be a high-flying corporate exec, and he's with one company for over 20 years. And he was a FIFO, he used to work a lot, Sydney, fly in, Sydney PNG. But his family lived on the Mornington Peninsula. And chapter 9, I think it's social connectivity. And I talk about a client that moved from Melbourne to Hong Kong at the time. And he goes, that really resonated. He goes, when I was there, I didn't realise I had a problem. But now I've read your book and I've read that story about your client who was in Hong Kong. He goes, that was me. He goes, I disconnected from all my friends, all my family, thinking I was doing the right thing. And he goes, I missed a decade of seeing my kids grow up. And that's stuff you just can't get back. That's priceless.
No.
Yeah. No. And it doesn't matter what you're earning and the investment properties, your kids don't care about that.
No,
they just want to be loved. They want to be tucked in. They want you to ask how their day was. It's the simple things. And I think a lot of the time, we act as puppets, we're controlled by other people, and we need to take a bit of ownership internally.
So I'm going to ask some quirky questions now.
Oh, look out.
Tell you about. If Blokes Inc. were turned into a movie, who would play you?
Oh, this is going to sound ridiculous. Brad Pitt.
I can see that. And who would play your worst self? Brad Pitt.
Oh. Let's go with Eminem.
Okay, next question. What's the most blokey thing you've done that you're proud of and one that you'll never admit again?
Oh, coming back on social connectivity, actually. not to say I was proud of, but it's a blokey thing. And I'd been backpacking in Southeast Asia with a close mate of mine, and there was another half a dozen that were living in London, and one of our friends had made a lot of money. So he goes, I'm going to pay for everyone to meet in San Sebastian for 48 hours. So he flew everyone from wherever we were to San Sebastian, and these were guys that we'd grown up with. And we had a very boyish evening, and I think we all ended up in a bathtub together.
You heard that, people. It's all recorded. I'm not going to go any further into that conversation. What's your go-to karaoke song, or one that would clear the room if you sang it?
Oh, it's a very good question, because I actually like my vocals, but no one else does. But
that's all right. I sing for my pleasure. No one else does.
Yeah. I grew up.
Said to me. So I've recently come back from looking after my grandson, and I was singing to my heart's content in the car, and he goes, Nanny, can you please stop singing? And I'm like, why is that, Odie? He goes, because you're hurting my ears.
Wow. My folks were, when Elton John and Neil Diamond were at their peak of their powers. So I grew up with a lot of those sort of tunes. But one song that probably resonates with Blokes Inc. and something they open up when I'm doing some keynote speaking is Forever Young by the Youth Group.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I won't belt it out, but it is a good song. But I do love a bit of Robbie Williams too.
I was just going to ask you, if your book came with a theme song, what would it be?
Yeah, probably. It's a good question. And I try and do it in Instagram. I use a lot of Aussie Crawl because I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And James Rain was a Peninsula boy, which is where I went to school. So Reckless is a key theme song, in the bathtub in San Sebastian. But, yeah, it's a good question.
If you could take one famous person on a bloke retreat, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. One famous person.
Would it be Climmy?
Yes, but Climmy and I have had our own blokes retreat, but I'd really like to see how Richard Branson operates,
Yeah, wouldn't that be good?
Yeah, Necker Island, maybe his private jet. I wouldn't do the space shuttle with him, but, yeah, I think he's a pretty interesting cat, and I used to love his books.
You wouldn't do the space shuttle?
No, I got no interest. I don't love flying.
Scary.
I don't love flying. But, yeah, I think Richard, he's had an incredible
100%.
career.
What's one item you can't live without but would never admit it in a tough guy circle?
Well, it's not a guy. It's just caffeine. I know you don't do it. I do caffeine.
Oh my God.
And my wife hates it.
Yep.
Hates it. But I did find something saying it's very good for you the other day. So.
Listeners out there, I've not had a cup of coffee in 33 years, or cup of tea, and never had a Red Bull, and I've never eaten tiramisu.
Oh.
So,
what about Biscoff? That seems to be getting a bit of a play at the moment.
No, well, I can't do Biscoff either.
It's just cocaine on steroids.
Yeah. No, I can't do any of that. And I don't eat sugar, so
yeah.
No, and I can't do dairy, so that rules all.
Okay.
As well. Okay. If you had to sum up Blokes Inc. using just 3 emojis, which ones would you pick?
Well, I love the 70s disco dancer.
Right.
So
the little black,
the purple guy
silhouette.
Yeah, the little purple guy.
Yeah.
I think I would use, the thank you sign and
like the prayer, thank you.
Yeah, prayer, engage, good luck, and either a bicep or 2 fingers.
2 fingers.
Which I'm lucky to have, as in peace, hanging there.
Yeah, 100%. So what's next for Tory?
That's a good question. We've got the bar and Melbourne book launch. I don't know when you're going to put this pod up, but there is a Melbourne. Okay, so perfect. We've got Melbourne 15th of May. If people want to come to the Central House, which is in Chirac Road, 6 till 8 p.m. And then from there, it's obviously trying to get more book sales, more speaking gigs, more seminars, workshops, and just helping men. You and I are talking about men's retreats and things like that. to get to the masses.
Starting that teenage book.
And looking at the teenage book, and a client of mine, Shoe Dog, which is a great story about Nike, and one of the local bookshops here that stocks my book put me onto it, and they've got a kids version of Shoe Dog, which is interesting. So I've got to drop off more books for them to sell this afternoon, and I'll pick up the copy of Shoe Dog. And I think I'll have to sit down with my 13-year-old son and my daughter and just get the lingo up to speed in terms of how I pronounce things, and
the terminology.
Maybe that's a little bit of a project for ChatGPT.
Yeah, maybe. I've got a couple of teenage grandsons as well, so we can definitely put our feelers out there. But as I was saying to you before, I strongly believe that we need to educate that generation, that they then don't end up like our generation in trouble. We address it, we give them a first aid kit, so to speak, with it on going forward and how they can live their best life without getting into the situations that we've all got ourselves into.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it, Justine. You mentioned it when we caught up in Byron, but I think that educational component's a key component. And as you say, we won't be in this predicament that we are now. And I think it's a lot of, it's environmental. Like, no longer is work 9 to 5. You're always connected, you're always on, you're always working, you're always comparing yourself with people. And I think there's a lot of external pressure that is placed upon people, and not only adults, but also kids. And I think if we can try and disconnect the kids from their, social devices and get them engaged in, a good old novel, then we'll be better off.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for taking the time out of your day today to have a chat with me.
It's always a pleasure, Justine, and sorry if I called you Juzzy too many times. But
when you read the book and the acknowledgements, I'm actually under Juzzy, not Justine. But that's fine. Everyone calls me Juzzy. I'll answer to anything.
Perfect.
So I will see you next week in Melbourne, and we will put in the show notes how to book in if you want to come to the book launch, and how, more importantly, you can purchase your own copy of Blokes Inc. Play a Bigger Game. So here's to a successful book launch next week to you, TT, and getting that Amazon bestseller out there.
I appreciate all your help and support, Justine. It's been awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the Resilience Mindset podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast to get your weekly fix listening to Resilience Queen Justine Martin. Follow Justine on social media at Resilience Mindset, or log on to justinemartin.com.au. And until next time, remember, life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient.